Let me first of all say thank you for your willingness to serve in our children and youth ministries here at First Baptist Church, and also to thank you for your commitment to making our teaching environment the safest environment it can be for our children and youth. We have many church events throughout the church year which will be the highlight of a child's life. We have our annual Easter egg hunt for children. We have our children's Christmas musical, our Sunday school for children on Sunday morning, and our vacation Bible school, as well as other ministries for our children here on campus. Our youth will participate in lock-ins. They will attend youth summer events at Caswell, and they will go on mission trips. All these ministries can be the turning point in a child's life for them to come to know Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. All of our volunteers take great strides to make these events the safest that they can be for our youth and children to attend. But sadly, all this can be marred by just one sexual abuse incident. No church wants to admit this may happen, but it can. So thank you for taking your time to learn more about what we can do as volunteers and what we can do as a church to reduce the risk of anything happening to our children and youth while they are on campus and under our care. You see in this passage from Mark 10:13 through 14 that says, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." This is the verse that the task force hung our hat on as we came up with our protection policy. If you have not seen a copy of this policy, you can go to our website, www.fbcmhc.org, and click on the Ministry tab at the top. Then you can come down and click on the Administration tab, and then that will take you to a page where you'll see the Child Protection Policy that you can download and review. But so often we will take precautions to protect our children from physical dangers, such as making sure we have safe furniture, we've got all the electrical outlets covered, and that the floors are not too slippery. But when it comes to taking precautions to protect our children from sexual abuse, then we may have objections. We may hear people say, "It will never happen here at our church, so what is the big deal?" Or we may have folks to say, "We cannot get enough volunteers as it is now, so we're just going to have another hurdle for them to go through." And then others may say that there's no way we will ask someone who's been serving faithfully for years to be subject to a background check. But as we begin to look at the devastation that just one sexual abuse incident can have on one child, then these objections, I believe, will fade away. As we begin this video training, let me share with you what our goal was as we put together this policy. Number one, it was first and foremost to protect our children. I think we all can agree that this is the most important thing. Second, we desire to send a message. We want to send a message to our community and also the potential perpetrators that we're doing all we can to protect our children and for the perpetrators to stay away. Also, we want to send a message to our parents that we take our role seriously when it comes to protecting our children. And then third, we want to protect our leaders and protect our church. Our leaders can be accused of anything, but by having a two-adult rule, it will protect them from any false accusations that can be made. It will also protect our church from being held liable of any negligence on our part. And fourth, it is to educate our volunteers on this all-important subject. While we cannot eliminate the risk entirely of anything happening to our children, no matter what steps we take, but what we can do is to reduce or minimize the risk the best that we can. Here are three underlying reasons we need to have this policy and training in place. These reasons are, number one, that the problem is real. It is happening throughout the country, and it can happen right here at First Baptist Church. And then when we begin to realize what the impact of one single incident will have on our church, then I think we can see the need for such a policy. This screen here shows the impact of an incident will have on our church and our community. It will cause a spiritual crisis, and it can cause tremendous damage to someone's faith. The media coverage and attention will ruin the reputation of our church. The financial cost can be astronomical. So you can see the need for us as a church to do everything in our power to reduce the risk. Part of supporting the creation of a child protection policy is understanding what child sexual abuse actually is. The precise legal definition of child sexual abuse or molestation varies from state to state, but it usually includes any form of sexual contact or exploitation in which a minor is being used for the sexual stimulation of the perpetrator. We also have to understand that there are other types of abuse that does not involve touching. We can have verbal abuse and nonviolent abuse as well. Sexual abuse that does not involve touching will include verbal comments, pornographic videos, obscene phone calls, exhibitionism, and allowing children to witness sexual activity. The full extent of child sexual abuse in our country is not known. There are anywhere between 500,000 to 1.5 million cases each year, although it's hard to come up with the exact number because there are many cases that will go unreported. When it comes to abuse, the statistics are that strangers account for less than 20% of abuse. So most perpetrators are people that are known and trusted. When it comes to sex offenders, you're not able to tell who they are. One study on the occurrence of child sexual abuse found that 27% of adult females and 16% of adult males were victims of molestation as a minor, and over 25% indicated this occurred before the age of 9. Volunteers and staff members should be alert to the physical signs of abuse and molestation, as well as to the behavioral and verbal signs a victim may exhibit. Some of the more common signs are summarized on the next 3 slides. Some of the physical signs are lacerations, nightmares, irritation and pain, difficulty with urination, discomfort when sitting, or torn or bloody underwear. These are some of the signs that we need to be alert to as ministers and volunteers. And some of the behavioral signs of abuse are anxiety when the child is approaching church, or nervous behavior toward adults, or sexual self-consciousness, or when the child begins to act out sexual behavior, or when they withdraw from church activities and for friends. These are the behavioral signs of abuse that we need to be alert to. And then some of the verbal signs that you may hear would be a child saying, "I don't like a particular church worker," or "so-and-so does things to me when we are alone." Or you may hear him say, "I don't like to be alone with so-and-so." Or "someone fooled around with me." All these physical, behavioral, and verbal signs of abuse should not be taken lightly. We need to be alert to these signs and talk to one of our ministers. Child sexual abuse is a devastating experience for the victim. Child sexual abuse robs children of their childhood and can potentially scar its young victims for life. Too often in the past, the effects of abuse have been minimized or dismissed. Children were viewed as being resilient, but recent studies have shown that children can suffer significant pain from even a single abusive incident. We must be aware of the pain and long-term suffering that can accompany such abuse. Here are some of the ways that child sexual abuse can affect the victim. Number one, it can cause them to lose their childhood memories, or they can have a loss of healthy social contact, or they can lose bodily integrity, or their self-esteem can be damaged. There may be a loss of sexual maturity or sexual dysfunction. Their identity can be lost. And there's a loss of a chance for a normal adult life. Consequences of abuse may plague a victim into adulthood that can include eating disorders, substance abuse, and possible perpetration of sexual abuse on others. The degree of damage to an individual depends upon several factors, including the intensity, duration, and the frequency of abuse. In addition, the relationship of the perpetrator to the child matters as well. If the abuser is a known and trusted authority figure in the child's life, the degree of impact increases dramatically. So, what is our ministry strategy to reduce the risk of anything happening to our children and youth while they're under our care? Remember, we cannot be 100% safe. What we want to do is to minimize the risk. Number one is we want to establish a policy, and then we want to abide by this policy. Second, we will screen our volunteers who work with our children and youth. And we will do this for all new volunteers by having an interview with them and by completing an application. The application will ask for personal information, past church activity, along with references from other churches and our church. We will also require reference checks and background checks on all new volunteers. The background checks will be done on all volunteers. We will not grandfather anyone in, and anyone who refuses to have a background check will not be allowed to volunteer to work with our children or youth. And also, we will require a 6-month rule. And that 6-month rule means that someone must be attending our church worship services and be in a Sunday school class for at least 6 months before they can work with our children. There are some exceptions made with the 6-month rule when it comes to our upward basketball ministry and also with our vacation Bible school. And then we will implement the 2 adult rule, so we will have proper supervision. And remember, when it comes to the 2 adult rule, a husband and wife will count as one adult. Also, an adult is someone who is at least 18 years of age, and one of the adults must be at least 21. There may be some low-risk situations where we may have only one adult, and in those cases, classroom doors will remain open if there is not visibility into the room. We have already put windows in all classrooms as a result of this policy. Also, we want to follow reporting procedures, which we'll look at a little later. Also, we want to respond to any allegations in a proper manner. And last, we will conduct training, which you are taking part of right now. This is our strategy. And remember, most churches who have had abuse do not have any of these practices in place. Here we see who will not be allowed to work with our children and youth. Remember, we're not trying to punish anyone. What we're trying to do is to do all we can to protect our children. So we can see that someone who's been convicted of or pled guilty or pled no contest to any misdemeanor or felony offense which in any way involved physical and or sexual abuse or assault upon a child under the age 18 or an adult will not be allowed to work with our children. When it comes to supervision, this is our second line of defense in protecting our children. Screening volunteers that we just talked about is the first line of defense. And when it comes to supervision, we must remember the principles of supervision. You see, it would be very impractical to have a policy for every situation that may arise. So knowing and understanding the principles will be key when it comes to supervising our children and youth. So when it comes to supervision, we must first assess the risk factors. There are low-risk situations which require general supervision, such as supervising of a group of children as a whole. In a classroom with 15 kids where you have an open environment and not isolated would be a low-risk situation. And I'm sure you probably can think of other low-risk situations within our church ministries. A high-risk situation would require more specific supervision, such as an overnight activity with youth or any activity where isolation with kids can occur. Remember, the principle here is as risk increases, supervision should also increase. When we have isolation, the risk increases as we just spoke about. Some of the events where isolation may occur are overnight activities. Where we have these activities, we want to get permission slips from parents for all overnight activities. Another area would be when an activity takes place in a person's home, or when an activity is in a closed room where there is no windows in the door and there's no visibility into the room. Another area would be with the bathroom. When it comes to taking children to the bathroom, we want to do all we can not to isolate ourselves in the bathroom with children. I know this is difficult. If you must take a child to the bathroom, try to have the doors open so someone can see in, and try not to be in the stall with the child. Another area where isolation can occur is in a car. We have a lot of youth activities where adults will transport youth to various events, especially such as a scavenger hunt. If you find yourself having to take a youth home by yourself, you are better off to call the parent and get their permission and let them know what time you're leaving and approximately what time you will be home with their child. Isolation can be eliminated when we have appropriate accountability with the proper number of adults. Let's take a look at this example here. We have two adults and one youth worker serving in the nursery. There are 6 babies and one needs a diaper change. One adult changes the diaper in the far corner of the room while the other adult takes a crying baby out of the room. This leaves a youth worker watching the other 4 babies. So take a minute and try to discern what is good about this situation, what concerns would you have, and what would be a safer solution. Take a moment. We see in this example, isolation initially is low. The nursery is well supervised until the two adults get called away to tend to the babies. You have one that's tending to the crying baby and the other one that's in the corner with the diaper. At this point, the nursery now poses a higher level of risk for the infants and the workers. The youth worker is too distracted trying to monitor the 4 babies she is now in charge of that she fails to notice the woman changing the baby's diaper in the corner. Diapering or any other bathroom-related issues should never be done in isolation. It leaves the child dangerously vulnerable. Plus, it puts the ministry worker in a position where no one can vouch for her actions. Also, with a 13-year-old youth worker and an adult worker, there's a disparity of age between volunteers. It is highly unlikely that the student worker will speak up if something seems out of place with her superior, let alone know to hold her supervisor accountable for her actions. And finally, while the likelihood of a woman being a sex offender is low, and studies estimate that approximately 94% of all perpetrators of sexual abuse are male, it can occur. Steer clear of making supervision policies based on the gender of workers. And remember, you can't tell by looking at someone whether he or she is a sex offender. A safer solution for this example would have been for the woman with the crying baby to call for backup and request that another adult step in until she can calm the crying baby. Or she could have remained just outside the door where she could monitor the youth worker and the woman changing the diaper until she finished. The goal should always be to create settings where isolation is eliminated and accountability exists. Here is another example. We have a teacher who invites their children's Sunday school class to return to the church on Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. for a party. No other activities are present on church property at that time. So take a moment to discern what is good about this situation. What concerns would you have? What would be a safer solution? In this example, the children meet in the same location in the afternoon as they did in the morning. The change in time, however, alters the number of people present in the building. As a result, the risk environment has changed. Isolation has increased, so risk has also increased. This means the supervision should also increase and become more accountable. Having at least 2 non-related adults present, for example, as well as having approval to sponsor the activity. Let's look at another variation of this example. What if the party occurs at a local restaurant rather than at the church? The typical restaurant does not represent isolated space. However, other risks could be present, including transportation to and from the restaurant. In addition, other safety factors require the need for 2 or more adults for any activity that is held off of church property. If one adult becomes unavailable for any reason, a second adult will be needed. The principle here when it comes to accountability is that the risk increases as accountability decreases. Here are some of the factors that we need to consider that will affect accountability. Number 1 is the personal character and integrity of the individual. Now we can check this one off because we would have completed the background checks on people before they begin to volunteer, so we would have this factor taken care of. Another is the number of people present. The more, the better. One thing that we possibly could do is have a building monitor someone in the building to monitor vacant rooms and bathrooms when we have people on campus. People are less likely to engage in inappropriate conduct if they think someone is watching. And the other factor is the degree of openness and approval. We do not want secret gatherings. Your ministry staff needs to know what is going on. Permission slips need to be obtained for activities away from the church. And we've already talked about calling parents if you must drive a youth home. Let's take a look at another example here. We have Fred, a college student and a volunteer worker with the high school youth group, who announces he is available for transportation if any of the members need a ride to a group activity. Ann, a 17-year-old high school senior, asked Fred for a ride. So again, what is good? What concerns do you have? And what would be a safer solution? Well, I think initially we don't see too much good in this example. The concern is that there is no accountability for Fred. To make this a safer situation, Fred could call the parents of Ann, or he could plan ahead and get permission slips from parents. Or maybe the safest solution would be to get a second adult to ride with him. And in this example, we see a 4th grade Sunday school class has 2 non-related adult teachers. The class meets at the home of the teachers on a Friday night from 7 to 9 p.m. to play volleyball. Both teachers are present and the parents also invited to attend. The activity has been approved by the Minister of Education and both teachers have been screened. So take a moment to think about what is good, what concerns you may have, and what would be a safer solution. This event is held off campus at the home of the teacher, which makes it a high-risk situation. The situation does not look too bad. The risk of abuse is low because we have 2 non-related adults. Parents have been invited, and it was known by the Minister of Education, and proper screening had taken place. Some factors that can lead to higher risk situations would be if a child gets another child alone in a bedroom, or if a teacher goes into the house with only one child. This would make it an isolated event where child abuse could take place. To avoid these scenarios, you should establish some boundaries concerning the use of the house. And risk factor number 3 is power and control. The principle here is risk increases when there is an imbalance of power and control. Remember that we said earlier that most victims know and trust their abuser. For this reason, the children are more vulnerable to sexual predators. Also, with the power and control a perpetrator has over the victim will fear their abuser. Also, control can be exerted in many ways, both physically and psychologically. Some abusers use what they call grooming techniques to gain trust and control of a child. They may offer cash, gifts, trips, fun experiences, and just shower the child with attention and favors. Children who are targets for abuse are no match for such perpetrators. Others in the church setting, Often in the church setting, individuals will use their spiritual authority as a means of power and control. Also, Abuse is less likely to occur when a balance of power exists. There are many cases where abuse occurs because of an imbalance of power that is age-related. It is less likely that a 9-year-old will molest another 9-year-old than for a 15-year-old to molest a 7-year-old. Now, as a way to review these risk factors and principles, here are some activities that represent a higher level of risk for sexual molestation to take place. Activities that occur at home, overnight activities, activities that involve changing clothes, events that involves groups of children with an age difference of 4+ years. Youth events that have 7th through 12th graders is a prime example of this type of event. Or any activity where we have isolation. As ministry leaders, we should pay careful attention to these type of activities. Again, as a way to review, here are some ways that we can reduce the risk. The physical arrangement of an area is crucial. We have proper windows in the doors. To monitor and secure unoccupied space in the building. To have open environments, visibility into the room. To have monitors or floaters to check on rooms. Examine the location and time of activity. To require advanced approval for activities. To increase the number of people present. And to take into account the age and maturity and influence when parenting of children. These will help us to reduce the risk. And to assess the risk, we want to know who is present, where do the meetings occur, what time do they occur, how often do they occur, has permission slips been obtained, and have volunteers and paid workers been screened. These are some of the things that as your staff we want to know. Now we're going to turn our attention to reporting procedures. Who must report? Here we see on this screen who must report. If you suspect anything happening, then you must report. Remember, you can report anonymously. And by reporting, you will not be held liable. Now, who do we report to if a situation occurs here at the church? Here are our reporting procedures when an incident has occurred. Hopefully, we'll never have to use this. But if there is an incident, you first want to report it to the minister who is directly responsible for that area of ministry. i.e., if it was something that happened in our youth ministries, you would report it to Deborah. And if it was something that happened within our children's ministry, you would report it to Daryl. Then it will be shared with the senior pastor or associate pastor. And then we will take it to the director of Department of Social Services of Carteret County and then make the report to the local law enforcement. So just remember, if there's an incident, you want to first of all, go directly to the minister who's responsible for that area of ministry. So now, how should we respond to allegations? First of all, we need to be prepared, and we do not want to express any form of disbelief. Here are some ways in which we can respond to allegations of abuse. First, we want to provide a caring response. Secondly, we want to be prepared mentally, and we do not want to minimize the complaint. Often people will play down the situation and say, I am sure they would not have done anything like that. So we do not want to minimize the complaint. Here are 3 points that we can focus on. Number 1 is take it seriously. Let them know that procedures exist and they will be followed, and that the church desires to extend care and support for them. And then we want to document, and we will have a form for you to use in case there is an incident. And then we want to provide support to the victim. These are the steps. This is how we want to respond to any allegation of abuse. In these next 4 slides, we will have some inappropriate responses and some appropriate responses to use when dealing with the victim. Here in this slide, we'll see some inappropriate and appropriate responses when it comes to the initial sharing with the victim. Some inappropriate responses would be, I can't believe that it happened. This seems impossible. And you're not making this up, are you? These are some inappropriate responses that we do not want to use. Some better ways to respond would be letting them know that you thank them for sharing, and also to let them know how hard this must be for them. And third, letting them know that they have done the right thing by sharing. So now, how should we respond when the perpetrator has been identified? Inappropriate responses would be, are you sure this isn't a case of mistaken identity? Or, I know him. I can't believe he would do such a thing. Some more appropriate responses would be, I want you to know that we take your allegation seriously. That would be the better response. And here, how do we respond when you begin getting the facts about what took place? Inappropriate response would be, it doesn't sound like that much happened. Don't you feel like you share some of the blame? You should have stopped him. These are responses that we do not want to use. The most appropriate responses would be, I am very sorry about what has happened. Or, we want to do everything within our power to help and support you. And so how do we respond when sharing about what will take place next? The inappropriate response would be, this is going to ruin our church. Have you thought through the implications? Or, you have put me in a very difficult spot. These are ways that we do not want to respond by. But the most appropriate response would be, we have procedures in place and we want to make certain that nothing like this will happen again. Or you can respond, you have taken a courageous step today. So these would be some appropriate responses here on responding to what will take place next. Congratulations. You have now completed the online audio-based child safety training. What I'd like for you to do is to sign the sheet to verify that you have completed this audio-based training and return that sheet to Daryl Williams. Also, you can go to www.ministryopportunities/FBC Morehead City, and complete the online information for us to complete a background check. After you've entered in the information, I will receive a notice that you have completed that, and then I will order the background check. Again, thank you for taking the time to review this child safety training and for volunteering your time with our children and youth ministries here at First Baptist Church.